Welcome, everyone, to the Sports Injury Central podcast. I'm Thomas Casale with ProFootballDoc, Dr. David Chao. Doc, how's it going today?
I'm doing well, doing well. Seems like NFL quote off season, but we have so much basketball stuff going on, and it's almost thankful baseball's not there yet, and lots of football stuff with combines.
Yeah, we have a lot to unpack with the combine, but as Doc mentioned, go to the site sicscore.com. We have injury analysis on every sport: NBA, Major League Baseball, always the NFL, college, anything big that happens, we'll be on it. And follow us on Twitter at ProFootballDoc, and subscribe to all our videos here. Doc, it was a big week at the combine. A lot of big names, injuries. I think I can sum up our what we're looking at in two words: wide receivers. Right? That's a lot of the big name wide receivers. People have questions about them. Now I know, talking to you, you think some are further along than others. Why don't we start with that?
Yeah, no question. There's a lot of talk about wide receivers, and the talk is among the draftniks is this wide receiver group is special, right? It's a big number of guys, a lot of top picks, and that's kind of been the trend, right? As offenses go to passing the dominant wide receivers and copycat league, and there's a lot to talk about there with injuries. It's several groups, but especially that one in particular, and we can get into it. Overall, though, I think this is in some ways a healthier group in terms of the 324 players than most. Usually, there's a little more oh my gosh issues, but here there's a lot of issues. But I don't know. There probably is only potentially one guy that might get ruled out or this that the other. That's usually where the doctors go with all of this. And the bottom line is, remember, it's an individual evaluation by 32 teams and their medical staffs, and they're not all the same. We get back to, and we can tell the Jalen Smith story. You know, I think it was consensus. I went on record saying he went from surefire first round, early top, generational talent to, I say, at best a day three pick, right? Is what I was saying because of his injury. Now, the Cowboys took him at the top of day two, but if you go back and evaluate his entire career, I think you could all agree that he should have been a day three pick in the end. But, and here's the other thing we all know that everyone says right after surgery, it's successful. Right after the draft, it's successful. But you can't judge draft success immediately after the draft. You can't judge your surgery right after it's done. It's only after the player comes back. But that's just some general topics to begin with.
Yeah, and Doc, as a long-time Dallas Cowboys fan, I can tell you that if you think something and Jerry Jones does the opposite, we chalk that one up in the right column for you, because Jerry drafting Jalen Smith was questionable at the time, and it remains questionable today. So I think you were the one correct on that analysis over the
But
Cowboys
I mean,
draft team.
I actually, Thomas, I don't lump you with the Dallas fans. Look, growing up, I was a Dallas Cowboy fan. I grew up in LA, and I didn't, for some reason, love the Rams. I loved what I would call the white hats and the black hats, right? I loved the Cowboys, the white hats, and the black hats, the Raiders. I mean, I don't know, just more personality. But let me tell you, I've gotten so much grief from Cowboy fans on my what I thought is just telling the truth on what we thought about Jalen Smith. And that first year when he really didn't play at all, nobody admitted anything about being wrong. The second year when he was spot at all, didn't look that good. But boy, that third year when he was okay, I mean, he did pretty well chasing down and going straight ahead line. And Jerry rewarded him with a big contract at the time, which surprised me. I guess Jerry was proving, Dr. Jerry was proving he was right. Boy, I heard from thousands of Cowboy fans, see how bad and wrong. I said, well, okay, now they figured out what he can do well because he's a great athlete, right? But wait till the league figures out what he still can't do well, which is move laterally. And the league
Yeah.
did. And his fourth year and beyond has not been so good. Look, I've never met Jalen Smith. Let me just put on the record. I love that kid. I mean, he
Well, yeah,
outdid.
everybody was rooting for him. I
I
mean, we all wanted him to be great.
He did way better than I thought he would, even with that third
Yeah,
year. And I'm happy for him that he got a second contract, right? At least something from Jerry. He's earned it, and he, outperformed what he should have been able to do, even what he did do. So make that clear. Not hating on him, but Cowboys fans are all in. I will say that.
well, yeah, well, almost 3 decades of winning nothing does that to you, Doc. I hate to tell you. Well, let's jump into some of this year's top prospects. Now, you mentioned there was one receiver who might be a little bit further off than the other three. I think I know who you're referring to. Why don't you tell everybody else? What do you think about it? I'll take an educated guess and say it's Justin Ross.
Well, yeah, I know. Look, a lot of the talk is on, John Mechie and Jameson Williams and those guys, the two Alabama receivers. And there's a host of ACL injuries. There's a third one as well. Um, my Look, those guys, just to talk about those guys for a second. I forget, was it John Mechie or Jameson Williams that was saying that they were way ahead? One said they were way ahead of schedule.
Williams.
Williams.
Yeah, Jamison Williams put the video out, and
And yes, he's okay. Let's say Jameson Williams. Once again, not hanging on Jameson. We at Sports Injury Central, we put out in game that he tore his ACL, and unfortunately, that was correct in the national championship game. He's draftable. He's going to be fine. But saying you're way ahead of schedule right now, scheduled to do what? I mean, we did a YouTube video, Sports Injury Central. He showed off he was catching these balls on a balance board. Don't be fooled. If you look at that video, it's a two-dimensional forward-backward balance board, not a three-dimensional ball balance board. And so if this is your right leg and the right foot and left leg, the weaker ACL side can go along for a ride with the more powerful side. My guess is Jameson Williams is such a good athlete that he could almost do that balance board drill, since it's just one dimensional, forward and backwards, one-legged, and catch all those passes. So look, is he going to he and his agents going to put out video of him not doing well? No, right? But you can't speed up biology. He's draftable. I don't doubt maybe that he's had a schedule for what he's saying, but look, Odell Beckham, a tried and true wide receiver in the NFL, took the first half of the season before he turned it around the second half of the season. That was an October ACL. This is a January ACL, right? And the same with John Mechie. Look, they're draftable. The Titans 2 years ago, was it, drafted Jeffrey Simmons coming off a combine prep ACL. They knew he wasn't ready week one. They figured at their draft slot, here's a top 10 talent, and we can get him into the teens. We're okay if he's not ready week one. And it's proven to be a very good pick, right? So it's not always about that. But to say that you're ready is just not true. I remember so many of these things. I remember who's the cornerback that the Eagles drafted out of Washington, tore his Achilles. And
oh yeah, no, I know who. The name escapes me, but I know exactly who you're. And
yeah.
they thought they drafted him for a year later.
Yeah, but he put out a lot of stuff, and through his doctor, who's actually a very good doctor, stuff that he's going to be running, and everyone's like, oh my God, he's great. He'll be running by training camp week one. Look, first of all, there's a difference between running and stopping on a dime, cutting and reacting, and basically he was parked the whole year. And I didn't think it was a bad pick. It was just not true, the agent spin that they were going to be fine that early. And teams know this, and don't be fooled. But Jameson Williams is in that category. John Mechie, the bigger worry for John Mechie, and I think he's going to be okay, is actually his heart issues. Every year.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that.
Okay. Like, for example, John Mechie he said his knee, his knee was clean. Okay, there's a difference in clean. He certainly wasn't cleared to do activities at combines because his ACL is still only a couple months old. But his heart is the issue. He missed 18 months, like almost his entire junior season plus on both ends with a heart issue where there'd be a fast heartbeat. Is this like some commotio cordis? There was mention in the media of cardiomyopathy or enlarged heart. I mean, nobody wants, a kid to quote die from cardiomyopathy. That's why typically every year at combines, we hear about one or two guys that get not passed on the physical, not allowed to work out even at combines when they're ready to go because of their heart issue. Thankfully, typically, they get cleared. Maurice Hurst is an example. Drafted out of Michigan, drafted by the Raiders. You even had one guy, a scout, say that the Raiders drafting him was unethical because of his medicals. And he's had a career. He was with the Raiders for a while. He's moved on, but we haven't heard anything about his heart since then. A lot of guys get temporarily, or a number of guys sometimes get temporarily not passed until they do the more full workup, cardiac echo, arteriogram, other studies, etc., stress echoes, other things, just to make sure they're okay and you don't have any, quote, sudden death. That's the last thing that you want. But thankfully, they usually work out. And we'll see. I think Mechie either has to provide all that workup or go through that workup. My feeling is it will work out. But we would never hear about him. Look, if he didn't have his ACL tear, he might have said, I'm working out the combines. Then all of a sudden he wouldn't be allowed to. And it would come out that temporarily he didn't pass the physical based on his heart. And then a month later he does when he does all the workout. We wouldn't even hear about that from John Mechie here because he wasn't going to be on the field. I'm not saying they had an issue for sure with his heart, but I'm telling you going in, the NFL teams fine-tooth combed his heart issue. I guarantee you he either provided tons of extra backup studies, thorough studies, recent on his heart, or he's redoing them to get cleared. I think he will get cleared. It's just a hurdle for him to get through is all. And then my biggest worry, look, on the surface, you'd say Justin Ross. I mean, as a freshman, I believe, at Clemson, he was Trevor Lawrence's, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Trevor Lawrence's number one receiver over Hunter Renfrow, over T. Higgins, over Amari Rodgers. I mean, that was some stacked receivers on that club. And as a freshman, he led receiving for Clemson. In some ways, he could be a steal. Yes, he had an ACL. I'm more worried about his neck. And look, I hope I'm wrong, but this is the one player that I'm worried about. May not, quote, pass his physical and won't pass. Hear me out. I've never met the guy. I've never seen an exam, a CT scan, an MRI, nothing. Just going over publicly available information and what we do to be a medical detective. He had a congenital fusion in his neck. In other words, instead of having C1 through 7 down to T1, cervical vertebra 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all free with discs and all having motion. At least 2 of those areas were fused together. That's what was reported. That's what a congenital fusion is. It could be 3. Some people are born that way. You could say not a big deal. Then there was a report that he had stingers, multiple stingers, and then he had a surgery. He likely has a fusion, which means in terms of motion segments, he was born with a fewer motion segment because of the fusion that he was born with. And now he's had another surgery to fuse another segment. My worry and the NFL team's worries are going to be this. Every time you lose a little bit of motion with the fusion, you put stress on the next level. Let's just say he's born with a C3-4 fusion. Just born with that. And now the disc at 4-5 breaks down. Now he gets that fused. Now he's got C3, 4, and 5 all moving as one, putting more stress on C5, 6. So here comes new breakdown. A general rule of thumb, there are exceptions. I was involved in one of the exceptions in my NFL career. You can fuse one level of your spine and your neck and be cleared, and two levels, and in general, you're not cleared. In general. Now, if you assume he was born with one level fused and now he's had the second fused, that's where the concern is. Where look, I think Mechie will pass his physical. Ross may not pass his physical in terms of their spine guys. Now, fans are going to say, what? He played all these years in college. Part of it is legal liability. Part of it is you want to draft someone that has long-term success or at least finish the first contract. Part of it is NFL doctors being protective where they don't want to bring a kid in and everyone's afraid of making somebody paralyzed. Part of it is they don't want the grief from their team if they say the guy's okay and it turns out he plays half the season and his career is done from a hit. That all factors in. And I'm not saying Clemson was derelict in not in allowing him to play football. It's just different standards and where teams and NFL teams and doctors, and they'll all go home if they didn't have them there and consult their spine specialist. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm worried this is the one big name guy this year that might make headlines for the wrong reason and either get ruled out or drop.
Okay, well, that's certainly interesting. When the draft props come out, we'll have to see what the number is. That'll be, I think, the one I'm going to be targeting the most.
I guess the smartest thing we could do as a company is say nothing, wait for the draft prop to come out and tell everybody what to do with it. But,
and those will be out soon. Those will be out soon. They usually come out after the combine, so those will be interesting to go over. Now, Doc, a guy I like as a player is the receiver from Georgia, George Pickens. Now, we have a story up at SICScore.com, a main story right now, that says Pickens still has hurdles to clear an ACL recovery. Can you go into that a little bit?
Well, Pickens, I think, is, he's got a full year, and he's doing his pro day workout, so he gets to work out on his terms. So no surprise, he can train for it. I think he should do reasonably well. I mean, he's got a head start on the two Alabama wide receivers, right? In terms of his injury. We'll see how he performs, but he's going to get better and better, so it almost doesn't matter as long as his physical was clean. Drake London, on the other hand, recovering from his ankle fracture dislocation. Of course, everyone says he's fine. And I actually think he's going to be fine, but he wasn't ready to work out at the combine. He's not going to be ready for his pro day. He's going to do a separate workout for scouts on April 5th, right before the draft. I'm actually high on Drake London because, and don't make me think that I'm always doom and gloom negative. I think he's going to recover very well. I don't know that he's 100% right now, and he certainly isn't. That's why he's not working out, and I don't know that he will be April 5th. But he projects to be fine. Jalen Waddle had a similar injury last year, and obviously he has done very, very well as a rookie. He made it back to the national championship game, caught some balls, but certainly was limping around. But that's a recovery that should do well. That's a Dak Prescott recovery. Jalen Waddle is a smaller speed receiver. Drake London is a bigger guy that probably doesn't rely on being shifty and quickness as much. I think he projects to recover very, very well there.
Okay. I think it's going to be an interesting draft with these receivers because, like you said, Doc, it only takes one team to fall in love with them. Not everybody has to see things the same way. And, I know in New England, Bill Belichick, if a guy was injured and Bill didn't think he was going to play that year, he would look at next year's draft and say, is there anybody better next year? Compare it to other people, like in round 2 here, round 2 there. So there's a lot that goes into this injury stuff that I think is interesting. But one thing I learned, you mentioned it earlier, one thing I learned since being here that I think is important. Before I got here, if I saw the Jameson Williams video, I would say, wow, Look what he's doing. But you have taught me to ask the question, okay, he's ahead of schedule to do what? Because it's a lot of people can walk or jog, but this guy's got to go in the NFL and cut against corners and do all kinds of stuff. So that's one of the main things I've learned here.
Yeah, and okay, since we're on the topic of, let's say, ACLs and recovery, you remember this summer when Bud Dupree got signed to a big long-term deal coming off his ACL tear with the Steelers. The Titans shelled out some money to sign him. I did not say it was a bad signing. I just said that he's going to take this year or the early part of this year at least to get better. And this summer there was all this video of him running around and looking really good. And we talked about it. He wasn't there. And you could still see him favoring it and limping on that side. I mean, just because they're running around and look great on film, what they do when they're 50% is more than I could ever do at 100%. They're just great athletes, but everyone in the NFL is great. Go back to a different example, but Derrick Henry in the playoffs, all that video. Look at how good he is. Look at how good he is. Well, we don't think he can run a certain direction, right, to the right, cut off his bad right foot. And in the playoff game, I think even though he came back, he proved that he wasn't 100% and he couldn't. So videos can fool the naked eye, the layperson. And you're absolutely right about drafts. And one of these podcasts will talk about my experience in the war room for drafts for the Chargers. And so I see some of it. Look, there's no question the GM isn't sharing with me his deep inner secrets, but I see what they do. And you're right. A lot of times, going back to the Titans again, they were saying they knew that Jeffrey Simmons wasn't going to be ready. They just said, well, at this level, going into the road in the future, this is great. Now, it's different. There may be a team that says, we need this player for this year to get the Lombardi. Well, if that's the case, some of these wide receivers coming off ACL are not the pick if you're saying we need them for this year. If you're saying we need them going in the future a long way, and whatever we get out of this year is a bonus, then they're imminently selectable. Jameson, Williams, and the crew, and Mechie and the crew. Okay, so
and even a team, Doc, like the Giants. Yeah. Like the Giants, who have multiple picks, right, and probably need a receiver. Maybe they have one of these guys rated high and one of their first-round picks. They see value there, knowing he's not going to play right away, but they don't really need him to play right away.
Well, yeah, especially, with the new head coach and the new GM, they have a little bit of leash, right? So you would hope that it's not a Houston situation where 1 year, one and done, that if they have a little bit of leash, 2-3 years of leash, they're not worried about this year as long as they're building for the future. And so some of those picks become value picks, as you say. In some ways, it's trading this year's lower pick for a higher pick next year, right? And the other thing you forget about, I think people forget about, not all first-round draft picks are the same, or second-round draft picks. A first-round draft pick in the top 3 is not the same as a first-round draft pick in the bottom 10, right? And so sometimes you either just have to take that lower first-round talent, or you say, look, I can get upper first-round talent, but I have to wait a little bit. And so it's a calculation from the GMs, and medical is just one part of the calculation.
Yeah, so, a lot going on, and we'll have a ton of coverage going into the NFL draft. So make sure to go to SICScore.com and subscribe to all our videos here. But one thing we're doing hard right now, Doc, is NBA. We got health matchups every night, different games, court views. We're all over the NBA right now. But before we leave here, I want to get your thoughts on one of the NBA's biggest names who was in the news recently, and I know you've had strong opinions on him, Zion Williamson. We heard now that he's going to start some basketball activities. And now, again, before I worked here, I'd hear that and say, oh, okay, well, he's coming back soon. But I know sometimes you have a deeper thought process on what's going on. So what are your thoughts on Zion?
Well, look, in December, we felt his season was done. in December, we figured that there likely is a second surgery coming. Now, the second surgery has not come yet. There's been all sorts of other, injection treatments and other things. But now he's, quote, cleared for some basketball activity. I mean, before I jumped on this podcast here, I went outside in the driveway and shot some hoops with my third grade daughter, who's going to play in her third grade basketball team, and taught her something. So she did some basketball activities, okay? And I did some basketball activities. That doesn't mean that you're like NBA is among the most elite athletes in the world. Let's take away the weight issue for Zion. Let's take away any foot issue for Zion. Okay? Let's pretend his foot's 100%, which I'm not sure it is. And we'll still see what happens, whether he has second procedure or not. But let's say his foot has no issue whatsoever, and there's no weight issue whatsoever. He's missed since August. He's starting some basketball activities now. Is he going to play next week? No way. He needs at least a month, assuming everything else is fine. And he's like a rocket ship ready to go. And then the season's over. I guess at the Pelicans, I mean, the best case scenario, I suppose, is if Zion somehow all of a sudden turns it around, has no problems, no weight issues, no foot issues, no setbacks in training, and the Pelicans somehow sneak into the play-in game and he actually plays some. That would be the best case. I still don't see it. These athletes are that special and that you just don't come off the street, which is kind of where Zion's been, and that's absent the weight issues. I don't see it, and the foot issues. And you have to ramp up slowly because the last thing you want is a setback on Zion and his foot. I think that was in response to some questions from a national NBA reporter, I think Brian Windhurst maybe, saying, we haven't heard from Zion in a while. And then the team the next day came out and said, well, he's been in Portland and he's going to do some basketball activities. I mean, Zion's been getting a lot of heat. Should he have called CJ McCollum? Yeah. A lot of heat from a former teammate in media that he's not the best teammate in the world. I mean, I don't know. That almost seems like the team put that out as just a reaction because the silence was deafening. Nobody had heard anything from Zion. So call me a skeptic. I'll believe that when I see it.
Okay. Well, make sure to come to SICScore.com. We'll have all the stuff on Zion, all the NBA stuff, matchups every night. We'll be following the draft, Doc. We got baseball, hopefully, coming soon. So, bunch of stuff up at SICScore.com.
And let me tell you.
Yeah, go ahead.
People will say, oh, you're a pro football doc. What do you know about basketball? I have covered basketball in my time. Just my experience is not as great. But here's the deal. This is not just me. We have basketball docs on board with us. Former Chicago Bulls doctor, Houston Rockets doctor, etc. They're in agreement on this. So it's really the doctors, the professional sports doctor, the pro basketball doc committee that comes up with this opinion. They just have better things to do than talk on a podcast and do video stuff. So I kind of get the mic, so to speak. But it's really their opinion as well.
Yeah, and it's been great insight so far, and we're going to have more of it for baseball soon. Everything else, March Madness, I'm going to be putting up together a list of some guys who are questionable going into the dance. We'll be reacting to all the stuff that happens on the court. So make sure, SICScore.com for all your injury analysis. Doc, it was great hearing your combine thoughts. For Tom Casale, Dr. David Chao, I'll see you next week, Doc.
Thank you.